If you are clicking on this video, then more than likely you are here to learn about the 5 signs of autism in infants and the 5 things that we noticed with Ella as she was a small baby. The earlier you get a diagnosis, even though it sounds terrifying to get a diagnosis, I always say a diagnosis brings services. Services are what is going to give your child their very best life. Number 1 thing we noticed, there was no social smiling. Ella did not, she smiled, obviously, she was a happy kid, but there was no like social smiling. There was no, like, if you smile at her, she's gonna reflectively smile back. That's typically a baby thing. Babies tend to be smiley. Ella was not that kid at all. She just was never like overly happy. She wasn't angry or anything, but she was never smiling in social situations or smiling at strangers or, you know, doing those cute, typical little baby things. Lack of eye contact. This has been a number 1 thing for us for years. Ella's eye contact is very poor. She did not have good eye contact from the time she was a small baby. So there was no eye contact. And I didn't know that was a thing. I'm gonna say that a lot because I had no idea that was a thing. Most babies do make eye contact. So if your child has really poor eye contact, I would definitely suggest maybe talking to the pediatrician about it. Number 3 was Ella did not respond to her name. I can't remember a time of her being a baby where I could say her name and she would like pay attention or look over. Overall, Ella just didn't really engage with us a lot. Like, we played with her a lot and stuff, but she didn't tend to really like to be played with. She was a very chill baby, never slept well. That's also, I don't know if that's on the list, but for us, she never, ever slept, ever. But she just wasn't a very interactive child. She didn't really like to be messed with. She didn't really love to be cuddled. She didn't really like to be played with and did not respond to her name. And we always thought she had maybe a hearing issue when we got her ears checked. That was one of the first things we checked and it was not. So number 3 would be she did not respond to her name. I would also say that was a red flag for us. The lack of social babbling. Kids, babies are like, you know how babies are. If you've been around a baby, a neurotypical child, they're very much chatty. Even though they're not saying any words, they're mommy, ma, moo, moo, me, ma, ooh, ah. Ella was not that kid. She was pretty quiet. Unless she was screaming because she was hungry, she was a pretty quiet kid. So social babbling is pretty neurotypical and a normal thing that babies should be experiencing or showing you. If there's a lack of that, perhaps maybe also speak to your pediatrician. That is something we definitely did not also have with Ella, was the lack of social. She just wasn't a typical baby. She just didn't really give it a hoot about anybody. She definitely wasn't socially babbling. That was not a thing at all. She wasn't a chatty baby. Number 5 red flag for us was the fixation of unusual objects. So basically she always had to have something in her hand. I thought that was a baby thing. Turns out it's kind of an autism thing. Not saying that if you do have a baby who loves to hold on to that bottle of or bag of wipes or some random object doesn't mean that they have autism. I never want to, like, you know, put that kind of thing in the universe, but she definitely had fixation on an object and it would last a couple weeks, and it was always in her hand, you guys, always in her hand. Again, just because your child may do 1 or 2 of these things or does any of these things does not mean they have autism. But if they do, it's okay. Mama, daddy, I'm hugging you. I'm sending you my love. A diagnosis is not the worst thing that will ever happen to you. I can promise you that. And remember, the earlier, the better.